So now, welcome to you all to this edition of webinar. And today, all of you know, 23rd January is one of the most important days in the history of this nation, in the modern history of this nation. Uh, in fact, let me see some faces. Okay, problem is that I see the videos. In fact, if some of you are able to open your video, it will be fine. And you know that it's difficult for me to just talk to a computer. But over the next maybe another 20-30 minutes, I will talk about certain things about Subhash Bose's life, and maybe will discuss the learnings that we get from there, and maybe some um, thing that stirs you. I would like you people to participate in the discussion, all of you, and let us see that. Okay, now when I start, I should tell that, and I'm very proud to announce that to anyone who cares to listen, that I was born in the same city, same place where Subhash Bose was born. And his early years, the like Subhash Bose spent his early years. No, I have no comparison. But I with great pride, I share this, and that is Cuttack. So Subhash Bose was born in Cuttack in 1897. And in a house, his father, Janaki Nath Bose, was an advocate in Cuttack. And those days, High Court was not there in Cuttack. Cuttack, Odisha was not a state, so there was a lower court. And he used to practice there. And one thing about Janaki Nath Bose was that in which many people were not, he was one of the founder members. He attended the first Congress in 1885, which was held in Bombay. And he had gone there. So the family from the very beginning had a very nationalistic fervor. They wanted India, maybe the concept of freedom, the way we understand today, might not have had percolated at that time, but nationalism, of course, had. That Indian nationalism was very, very deep-rooted. And that's how, when we look at Bose's life, most of our lives, they get shaped. And we were fortunate that he was born in a family where the head of the family was a devout nationalist. And Subhash Bose, because his father was very rich, relatively speaking, those days, he was a very rich man. So he wanted his son to have European education. So what did he do? He sent his son to a European school, European managed school in Cuttack. The son went there and look at it. A young child, after couple of years, says that I don't want to go to that English school. I want to study in the district school, Ravisha College School. Look at it. And his father acceded to his request and sent him to Ravisha College School. And in fact, from that school, later on, a grand college emerged, Ravisha College. And very happy that I also studied in the same college. It came out of the school. And so when we went to that school, and I think India was at that time must have been very fortunate in that school. They had a headmaster called Beni Madhav Das. You know, many people we students, and Beni Madhav Das was a great patriot, a nationalist. And though he worked under government, the then government, and we'll have to understand this, it was a government-run school. His salary was paid by the government, by the British government. But this person, in very ingenious way, sowed the seeds of nationalism in his students. In fact, let me tell you this. Impact of Beni Madhav Das was so much on that. I will talk about Beni Madhav Das. It is not, you know, about Subhash Bose. You have hundreds and thousands of books, articles, films, documentary. But when I watch all this, when I see all this, I am taken by surprise. Yes, we need to talk about his achievements. That will, of course, today also we try to do and try to assess. But rarely you come across a documentary, an article, which talks about the great teachers who had influenced Subhash Bose's journey. And the journey that was, all of us know. I'll come to that, the impact of it, which again is very, very rarely talked about. But impact it had. We say that he was a great nationalist, great patriot who fought for the freedom of this country. But because, and this is a place I should state that, for many years in this country, some or other, because of different political reasons, different ideological thing, the alternative history, the alternative facts, though they were fact, they are facts, but never, but some or other got shielded. And we will discuss those as I go along with this. We will discuss those. What are those alternative facts which we need to focus on, which we need to understand and appreciate? Post-independence India, and I should say this, and with all responsibility, I am saying this. The post-independent India has not done justice to Subhash Chandra Bose, or justice to those people, those who had influenced the path that Subhash Bose took, those who were behind it. And one of the persons, as I was telling, that Beni Madhav Das. In fact, if I remember it correctly, when I was a child, I had read it. Beni Madhav Das's daughter, later on, she also became a freedom fighter. I'll talk about it later. So when Subhash Bose got into the school, a bright, brilliant boy, and of course, he had all the necessary resources to exhibit his brilliance, and came under the tutelage of Beni Madhav Das. While teaching him maths, English, literature, history, geography, Beni Madhav Das also very slowly sowed the seeds of nationalism in this young man's heart. It was such that, much later, I think it was 1909 or so, or just beyond that, that he wanted, one of the first, I should say, after there are, of course, many people gave their lives, but officially after 1857's War of Independence, the first War of Independence that we fought, there was a period of lull, little bit. Of course, there were uprising here and there. That's true. But one of the what we call is in Bengal, it started with under the tutelage of Aurobindo Ghosh. Youngsters took over arms to fight for our freedom. And one such patriots, there are two, of course, Prafulla Chaki and Khudiram Bose. And Khudiram Bose is a young man who was kindled with this idea of freedom and rising against the British imperialism, the torture, the oppression that they created in this country. And this young man, 16 years age, he fought. And of course, he and his friends were caught. His friend Prafulla Chaki were caught. And Prafulla Chaki killed himself with a gun, which Khudiram could not. He was younger, much younger. You can imagine, 16-year-old. So he was tried and hanged. And after he was hanged, Subhash Bose in his school celebrated Khudiram's death anniversary. And he was, and that showed the spirit. And despite all types of fear, police would catch him, they will jail him, and in spite of all this, one can understand the courage. It's a lot of courage. It's not so easy. We celebrate those people because they had extraordinary courage to stand up against oppression. Because most people are like most people do not have the courage. They may be wanting, but may not have the courage to stand up. And that's extraordinary courage. And Subhash Bose had that sort of courage at a very young age. Khudiram Bose, of course, had this courage. Prafulla Chaki had this courage at a very, very young age to defy, to stand up. And it was the mighty British Empire. That is one thing. So, Subhash Bose, at a very, very early, that's what I'm saying, at a very early age, when he studied history. And Benibhadra Das kindled this idea that you look at India's history, tradition, and he understood the politics of Britishers. I'll just give you this, and you will have to understand. With about 1,000 officers who fought against Indians for Britishers. Do you think they got all the army from England, UK? They ruled with iron fist over millions of people by using those very people, Indians. Indians were fighting against, that we should never forget. Indians were fighting against Indians. Indians were oppressing Indians on behalf of the British Empire. It was at a very early age, Subhash Bose could understand that by creating a psyche among Indians, a psyche of inferiority, that you are inferior people, you can be subjugated. A psyche was being created. With the help of that very many Indians, they could subjugate Indians. There is no other example of this in history, in any other country. And why was it? Why they were able to do this? The first thing, when Britishers came here, they understood that this society is layered society. And yeah, tell me this, many people may not know. You know, one of the most decisive, I'll come back to Subhash Bose, but you'll have to understand the background. Do you know what was the most decisive victory of Britishers in India, which actually laid the foundation of the great empire?
Battle of Plassey.
It was not 1757. Many of us, we of course say 1757. But 1757 was starting in Battle of Plassey. But which one after that?
Battle of Buxar.
To some extent 64, but it was not, because large part, it was only Bengal, Bihar and Odisha, a small part of this country.
Yes, sir.
There was a larger power at that time, which was dominating both north and western and large part of South India.
The Delhi Empire, the Mughal Empire.
No. Mughals were very
Marathas,
weak.
the Marathas.
Marathas, yes.
The Anglo-Maratha War.
And
yes, sir.
Please understand, the Peshwa was defeated in Dahod. Who were fighting against Peshwa? British army, of course. But who in the British army were fighting against Peshwas? Once you understand that Britishers, they did not bring army from England or Australia or any other, Australia was not, or any other place in the world. They took these people, the warriors of our country, the brave warriors of the country. They could take advantage of that because the society was divided. Society was layered. And Subhash was at a very early childhood, while he was studying in collegiate, Ravenshaw Collegiate School, he understood, because of course his teacher was there. No one talks about the teacher. Because I am a teacher, I will always talk about the teacher who influenced. Benimahadev Das showed him the other picture, that it was not the British who conquered us. They never had that might, they never had that strength to conquer a country like India. India got conquered because we were a divided, different division was in layer after. It was not one or two divisions. It was divided into hundreds different layers. So it is said, I don't know whether actually it is true, but I read it. That's why I'm telling you. That when Subhash Bose was asked about the British India policy during his ICS exam, he used one word, one sentence. Well, it is a policy of divide and rule. And what Subhash, great brilliance, he thought that two things we'll have to do, we'll have to accomplish. One is, of course, unite the country. Of course, getting out of these barriers of caste, class, region, and we'll have to have an India which is united. Not getting subdued within our small territories, subsumed within the small territories. Though I know many people will critique me immediately, but let me tell you another fact of the Congress when it was established, the first Congress. We know what that, but I'm just restating it. Everyone knows it's a written history, part of our written history. That for a long time, Congress was created in 1885 by an ex-ICS officer, Imperial Civil Services. And it was created. Do you know why it was created in 1885? Any reason? Anyone who would know about it?
Sir, can you repeat the question?
That Indian National Congress was created in 1885 by, it was actually idea of a ex-civil servant, ICS officer.
W.C.
Yeah.
Banerjee.
Huh?
W.C. Banerjee.
No, he was not. He
AO
did not create Congress. It was an idea of a
The AO Hume he created.
A.O. Hume, yes,
So
yes.
that to
AO
mediate
Hume.
between
Yes.
British Empire and the Indian people, he created Congress. He created Congress as a mediator between British Empire and Indian people, to act as a mediator.
So you are on mute.
No, I just there's some problem here with my audio. I'll just take few seconds. Okay, now I can hear you more clearly. So the idea was not for freedom. The idea was not to have what we later on know as Swaraj, but idea was to strengthen the British Raj, help the British Raj, so that the administration of this country can be smoothened. And basically, as you very rightly said, become a mediator between the government and the people. However, though, sometimes you start something, a journey, and on the way you pick up your travelers, and sometimes the travelers take you to a different app. And there were, of course, predecessors of Subhash Bose, who were ahead of Subhash Bose's time, and who actually held a sway over the Congress. All of you know Lal Bal Pal, and they were not moderators. They wanted Swaraj. And so let me, sorry, I got disturbed. So let me bring out what Subhash Bose. So they wanted. So by the time Subhash Bose came to his college, and in a school, as I told you, that he did these things, and he understood the history of this nation. And he understood very clearly that history is, and second thing he understood, that's what I should underline here. He also understood, because he read on the first war of independence, which Britishers, pejoratively they termed it as Sepoy Mutiny. That was a pejorative term. It was not a mutiny, it was a fight for independence, the first real battle for independence. And Britishers, of course, from that fight of independence, they're very quick to learn. Learning people who learn fast, they also enjoy the world. That's why they immediately understood that some or other you will have to create it, because you cannot depend on British forces. You will have to get Indians to fight, but it has to be trained in a different way. They will have to raised in a different way, so that they have loyalty. They have complete loyalty to British Empire. Because they knew that without Indians, you cannot rule India. That was very evident by 1857. It was extremely evident that you will have to have. And how to make your own people fight against you. The whole British machinery, from Oxford, Cambridge, to all those universities that were created in the country. In fact, you will be very, it will be interesting to understand that all the universities came up 1857, post 1857. And the whole objective was that how do we fight these people so that they become good servants, training people to become good servants. And they can, on your behalf, they can fight their own people. And that for that, you need to change everything. You need to change history. You need to change understanding of history. You need to change geography. You need to change culture. What today we call it as soft power. Don't think that Britishers they ruled this country for 190 years with just firepower. No, it is not possible. Impossible for any country to do that. Subhash Bose understood the problem of this soft power. But he also understood that military gives us strength to the British power. It is also soft power, both when you use it. He wanted to join freedom movement much before, at a much younger age. But his father, Janaki Nath Bose, I think I might have talked about it to some of you earlier, but let me reiterate it. His father, Janaki Nath Bose, told him one very important thing, that, look, if you get into politics today and start talking about freedom, people will not respect you so much. But if you become something, you will become a credible source. You'll have to establish yourself. So you go to England, because he could afford it, of course. You go to England, either you become ICS or a barrister, does not matter what you come. But if you become ICS, in fact, when he went to England after that, he knew he was a brilliant person, no doubt about it. He told his father, I want to come back and India is burning now. This is the right time for me. His father said, no, don't do that mistake. You achieve something. And I tell you, all of you, please remember these words. People will not listen to you until unless you can showcase something for them to do, that you have achieved. There's something should be demonstrated. So and because it was a country which was enslaved, that's why it was needed more. Today it may not be true, but that time it was more true, because we were a group of enslaved people. So what he did is he wanted to come back. His father said, no, you cannot come back. Either you become ICS or a barrister. And after that you say that I don't want to practice, I don't want to take up this job. I want to give my life for freedom. He said, look at Mohandas. Later on we know as Mahatma. He was a barrister. So people accept, oh, all those barristers are there. So you need to. And once you come back, your return will make an eventful thing, most eventful, so that it attracts attention. People should get to know about it. So after Subhash Bose got his ICS, the most coveted service in the world, let me tell you, Indian civil services was one of the most coveted service in the world. No other service gave such amount of money, such amount of prestige and power. Almost one ICS officer as a collector could exercise. Those days collectors had different power because it was an enslaved country. They were de facto rulers of a kingdom, almost as big as a kingdom. That those districts were bigger than, sometimes bigger than the countries in Europe. So you get to rule over such a huge mass of people and such a huge land. That is why it was the most coveted service. And his father, I think you should all understand this. In order to gain people's trust, confidence, you should not only make your sacrifices, but your sacrifices should be seen by others. You should make sacrifices, but sacrifice. So when Subhash Bose, that event itself was a big event. That Subhash Chandra Bose resigns from ICS to take over, to join Congress to fight for freedom. Oh my God, what a headline. Hundreds and thousands of people came to Bombay. It did not come to Calcutta. It was very, very, some of the things we do later on, we understand why it was done. Now I understand. He came to Bombay, the then Bombay. And hundreds and thousands of people gathered at the jetty to see this man. What sort of, they wanted to, and let me tell you at this point in time, that those hundreds and thousands who had gathered there at the dock, they had come, many of them might have come to see, oh my God, what sort of a foolish person this is, who has got ICS and resigned. And he's not a foolish, because he has got ICS. So that it is an oxymoron. You cannot be foolish because you are an ICS, but your act is not in sync with what normally people will do. Are you getting this? Many people do at a maybe much smaller scale. We may not take note, but when it happens at that scale. So Subhash Bose, because of this sacrifice, which was quote unquote sacrifice, which was seen by many others as a great sacrifice, became the equity, the first equity. In order in leadership, I always talk about it, that equity we get, people have to see your sacrifice. They will have to perceive that you have sacrificed something. And when can we sacrifice something? Only when we have something. Many people, I'll go into a fast forward mode because I don't want to keep you for long. And when we get into a fast forward mode, I'll just come to this. Before actually Subhash Bose escaped from the clutches of British Empire to Europe. Before that, he had visited Europe. His health had deteriorated, so he was in Europe. And in Europe, when he was in Vienna. He had met certain things we do not talk about it. And I think it's a time that we talk about it. In Vienna, he met at that time Vithalbhai Patel, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel's elder brother, who was a very rich man. In fact, he said, okay, so, and by that time, Subhash knew that this is a time to break what they call is that iron shield, the British Indian Army, and uprising, because he knew that Britishers are able to rule this country, because we Indians are fighting ourselves. That was very clear. You know, this country will be the greatest nation in the earth, on the earth, greatest nation, only when it is not divided. We stand united across caste, class, gender, religion, everything. And that Subhash Bose understood. Someone said something. Any question? Okay. Someone asked you to jump. Okay. So he's the idea of this. In fact, Vitalbhai promised money to him. He said, "I will give you money." Of course, Vallabhbhai Patel later on fought with him. Court cases were there. But anyway, that's a separate story. The point is that that point in time, Subhash Bose realized that if through some means we can shake this loyalty business from Britishers by Indian soldiers, then it was. So that started. And of course, you know, if you want to know about it, watch all the documentaries, videos, and all that. That's there on the way. I will not talk about how he escaped the route. That was one of the most, I should say, very an adventurous journey of an extremely courageous man. And nothing was greater to him than his patriotism. He fought with Gandhi. Look at a man when Gandhi was the undisputed, and this is a learning for all of you. Let me tell you, never ever think any one person can sway all the time, even if he or she is the most powerful person at that point in time. No person. Because that time when we are talking about when Subhash Bose fought the presidential election in Congress, Gandhi was the supreme authority. Not a small thing could pass within Congress without Gandhi's approval. Gandhi was a great person, no doubt about it. But when Subhash Bose challenged him, that how could you stop the freedom movement? How could you stop it when that was the right time? Strike the iron when it is hot. You have delayed our India. Because for Subhash, as a patriot, his objective was, let us first be free from the shackles. And we will deal with our own country, our fate, whatever it is. But this oppressing imperialist should leave the country first. That is where there was a great divide. In fact, the person he really looked up to, he always thought, he's the person on my side, became ambivalent. That was the great leader, Jawaharlal Nehru. First, Subhash Bose actually started thinking that he was, but then he became ambivalent. Subhash fought the election. And think about this groundswell, the groundswell that many leaders fail to understand, many powerful leaders fail to understand. On the surface of it, in the Congress, all the top people knew that Subhash it's a sheer defeat for Subhash. Gandhi went on campaigning for Pattavi Sitaramaiah. And he told the constituents, the electorates, that if Pattavi's defeat will be my defeat. You are Gandhi, he's not fighting. It is, I am fighting. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi is fighting. Think about it. And this man, who had actually no big family base within the party, this man who had no support of the top leaders, all the top leaders were against him. I'll talk about it slightly later, that how they conspired when he became president. But still he became president. What it tells us? It tells us that ordinary party workers across caste, across the states, They were. And Subhash Bose understood it. They were with him. Otherwise, it is so difficult. It is so difficult to defeat that power of Gandhi at that in his heydays. Gandhi was in his prime. But all organizations, one thing I should tell you, all organizations, and please understand this, as individuals, we are always little bit weaker in front of a huge organization, any organization for that matter. And when the heads of those organizations, powerful interest groups in those organizations, I'm talking about all organizations, they play their own politics. When Subhash got elected as a leader, he was actually not allowed to function. The treasurer will say, sir, no money. You have your own meeting, but for meeting you need money. How can you conduct a meeting? Pandal hoga, all these things will be there. So how could you conduct these meetings, these things, or any activity of the party? Subhash was understood very quickly that he cannot function because all of these people have ganged up against him. They were all followers of Gandhi. Because one thing I should tell you at this point, it was also ideological. All those people, if you look at it someday, true historian, most historians I believe are not true, but true historians someday come, will do an analysis of all those people who conspired against Subhash Bose within the Congress. What was their background? Who were these people? I think that history will tell us someday. Some true historian will come and tell us about in detail that who were these people who did not give the money. What was that person's background? And in terms of their socioeconomic status, in terms of the land holdings and all that, if a good analysis should be done. And Subhash saw that it is not. So he's second, because already he had talked in Europe. After that, he had gone to Europe and found out that it is possible for him to raise this. You know, this formation of Azad, though let me tell you, at this point in time, we credit Subhash Bose for Azad in Poch, but Indian National Army was formed slightly before Subhash's arrival in Japan. There was a person called Rasbihari Bose who had already traveled to, he was a person, Rasbihari Bose was another interesting character and a very forgotten character in the history of freedom movement in India. Rasbihari Bose actually was another patriot, a nationalist, who engineered an attack on Curzon, Lord Curzon, who was the viceroy of the country. And so when things got very hot up and he was about to be caught, he escaped to Japan. And with the help of Japanese, he could raise an Indian army, very small outfit. But Subhash Bose, with his, he was very sweet, he was dashing, and he commanded respect of most people. So when he took over, Rasbihari Bose handed over the charge. When he went to Japan, Rasbihari Bose handed over the charge to Subhash Bose. That you now become, you take charge of army. I know a young man like you can do wonderful things. So Subhash Bose, when he took over the charge, he inspired confidence, and all the hundreds and thousands of Indians, those who were living in all throughout Southeast Asia, he went to their doorsteps, asked for money. You see, please understand, Britishers gave us a wrong notion that Indian National Army was funded by Japan, little bit maybe at the beginning, but largely it was funded by Indian money, Indians who gave the money to Azad Hind Fauj. And Indian money that Subhash Bose took from all over the Southeast Asia. He will have meetings and take. So please understand, it was Indian money with which our Indian National Army was fighting. Of course, Subhash's aim was much bigger than this. He knew to the core of his belief that if this army succeeds a little bit, he knew that it is impossible for this army alone to fight and win India. But he knew his objective was not that. His objective was that if this army succeeds little bit, then all those Indians who are fighting for the imperial forces across continents, all those people who were giving up their lives for the Britishers, Indian soldiers, they will stand up. They will start an uprising. And his objective was that. His objective was to create a crack. He knew very many people say, he did not know how could you have fought a British army. His objective was not just fighting the British army to say, I think that Indians should become convinced. It was a, what you call it, as a symbolic action. That people will get the belief that we can fight these white men. As Japanese would say, white barbarians, red-faced barbarians. And that Subhash Bose knew that we can do this. And you see, even if in the defeat of Indian National Army, and that's where I should end, what happened? All the Navy personnel in Bombay, they mutinied. And many of our great leaders, they kept mum when these people were hanged. But that mutiny told, and Azad Hind Fauj told, look, Britishers did not live like that. Yeah, many people think that we got this freedom because we fought without sword. No. It was not just non-violence. Non-violence might have had impact. But it was, Britishers understood immediately after Second World War that this army, based on whom these Indians, which we have actually used to fight against Indians, we cannot do it in future. They will not be so loyal to us in future. And that is the crack in the imperialism, in the fortress of imperialism. That is the crack that Subhash Bose introduced. India might forget. We say we should be a nation. As a nation, we should be grateful. This great man who changed the course of history. And always remember one thing, and I think somewhere Rama Harare had written it, those who give up their lives, those who fight to change the course of history, themselves, very rarely they get a chance to get the fruits of that. To Subhash Bose, we can pay our gratitude to this great leader, great son of India, great patriot, great nationalist, and who never gave up his core cultural beliefs. He practiced it. But of course, he said that is by private affair. The core cultural beliefs. So on this day, 23rd January, let us learn from this great man's sacrifices. And some of the learnings I have already talked about leadership and all that. And if we can take a bit of it in our heart, then maybe this country will be great once again. In the world, this will be the most powerful, most humane country, I should say. We are human, this should become. And thank you, all of you, for at least listening to me. And if you, not by me, but Subhash's life, and do more study on this. I would, I should say this, that they should kindle a thought of looking at the alternative history, the history that has not been taught in our schools, in colleges. Look at those alternative interpretation, alternative history, alternative facts. Look at the facts from a different point of view. You will find truth emerging. Maybe somewhere the truth will come. Thank you so much. Bye bye. See you. Sorry. Any comments? Any question to me? I'll be happy if we have time. You have. Some of you have maybe having classes, but we have 5-6 minutes time. Any question, anything? Any observation, question?
Excuse me, sir. Shamita here.
Yeah.
So,
Please.
do you think Subhash Chandra Bose will be happy with the state of Indian society today, divided as it is with language, religion? Still, the problems of the past still continue even after independence.
True. Yeah, we had a opportunity over last 70 years, since 47, we had an opportunity. But those who took over the mantle, they could have had a very different way of looking at it. They could have had they had the opportunity to design the society in a very different way. Yes, it is a lot of things remains to be done, and it is over a period and very slowly. And let me tell you one thing. People, those who have in a very subtle way benefited from the division, in a subtle way. And the division is not just along caste lines, or division is not just along religion, line of religion. There are people have benefited, taken advantage because they knew that as long as the division is there, because the same policy, divide, it is easier to rule when you have divided a society. It is easier to rule. So we need to wait for another Subhash somewhere, and I'm sure Subhash will come along the way sometime, because as an Indian, I believe in that somewhere it will repeat itself. Somewhere it will come in the course of history. Someone will come and maybe. But we should. I should also request all of you to look at the fact that in our own small way, in our own very little way, we can bring about, instead of waiting for the Godot, we can also, in our own sphere of influence, we may reduce this. We may say, okay, it does not matter who comes from where. It does not matter who comes from which caste group or religious group. Everybody is same to me. Everyone is same. Because for 70 years we have done this. We have, I don't know whether it is politically correct, but I should say the first thing that should not have been done in this country is creating linguistic states. We should have been mixed 3 language. Every state should have. So there should have been a mix. There should have been a mixed language. Then we talk about caste and religion. That will come later. And we have never done this. Maybe someday some person, your group, you are youngsters. My generation is going out. One of my friend, he has written a very good book. Raja Parisha has written on Subhash Bose. If you get on the net, it's a pictorial thing, but very coffee book style. Anyway, so I say that yes, it is not, but this situation is also not very happy. There are a lot to achieve, miles to go before we sleep. Okay. Any
Thank you, sir.
other?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. And there's no CP, huh? This, I just wanted to talk. In fact, when it came from AICT that we should have this webinar, I thought, let me talk to students about this webinar and this Subhash Bose as the alternative historical interpretation. Though I'm not I'm a what I call myself is an amateur historian, so I don't delve into the, but I have studied history, that's true, in my courses, and though I've studied the methodology of history also, and but I never, because I'm a psychologist. But history is my passion, and that's how I looked at Subhas's time. And okay, I think you have many other things to do. Thank you so much for being patient, and see you.